Joseph Stalin, a name synonymous with power, tyranny, and a dark chapter in human history. His reign as the leader of the Soviet Union left an indelible mark on the world. But it's the untold secrets behind his genocides that continue to intrigue and horrify us to this day. Stalin's genocidal policies caused suffering for millions of people, from the tragic Holodomor famine in Ukraine to the harsh purges of those seen as enemies of the state. Join us as we confront the darkest chapters of history and shine a light on the untold secrets of Stalin's genocides. The Ukrainian famine. Among those who support the war in Ukraine, images and symbols of Stalin are seen as signs of Russia's returning strength. There's a well-known statistic that every family in the Soviet Union lost someone during World War II, which Russians refer to as the Great Patriotic War. However, it's less commonly mentioned that nearly every family, from the most powerful to the poorest, also lost someone due to Stalin's brutal regime. The Ukrainian famine, known as the Holodomor, stands as one of the most tragic episodes of Stalin's genocidal policies. Occurring between 1932 and 1933, this man-made famine was engineered by Stalin's regime as a brutal tactic to crush Ukrainian nationalism and resistance to Soviet rule. Through forced collectivization and grain confiscation, Stalin's policies deliberately deprived Ukrainian peasants of food, leading to widespread starvation and death. Estimates of the death toll vary, but it is believed that millions of Ukrainians perished as a result of the famine. The Holodomor not only resulted in unimaginable suffering and loss of life, but also left a deep scar on the Ukrainian psyche and collective memory, serving as a stark reminder of the atrocities committed under Stalin's rule. Ethnic cleansing. Stalin's regime, known for its iron-fisted control, meticulously orchestrated a campaign of terror through systematic deportations and ethnic cleansing, targeting minority groups perceived as threats to Soviet authority. Among the victims were Crimean Tatars, Chechens, and Volga Germans, forcibly removed from their ancestral lands and relocated to remote regions within the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. Families were torn apart and communities shattered, as they were herded into cattle cars and transported to unfamiliar territories. Once resettled, they faced harsh conditions, lacking adequate shelter, food, and medical care. Many perished during the grueling journey or succumbed to the harsh realities of their new surroundings. The Great Purge. The Great Purge, also known as the Great Terror, was a period of mass repression and political persecution orchestrated by Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union during the late 1930s. This ruthless campaign aimed to consolidate Stalin's power and eliminate perceived threats to his authority within the Communist Party and society at large. Under the guise of rooting out enemies of the state and counter-revolutionaries, Stalin unleashed a reign of terror, targeting political opponents, intellectuals, military leaders, and ordinary citizens alike. Show trials, fabricated charges, and extrajudicial executions became commonplace, as millions of individuals were arrested, tortured, and executed or sent to labor camps in Siberia. The death toll of the Great Purge is estimated to be in the millions, making it one of the deadliest episodes of political repression in modern history. Stalin's role in Bolshevik fundraising and criminal acts. In the early 1900s, Stalin surrounded himself with a group dedicated to the communist cause. He went by the alias Koba, taken from a popular Georgian book titled The Patricide, which highlighted corruption and discrimination in Georgian society during the late 1800s. It's believed that Stalin and his associates carried out several bank robberies to fund the Bolsheviks. One of Stalin's most notable exploits occurred in 1907 when he orchestrated the daylight robbery of a stagecoach carrying money to the largest bank in Georgia's capital. The shameless attack resulted in the deaths of 40 people and numerous injuries. Both Stalin and Lenin were involved in planning the robbery, along with some of Lenin's close associates. Despite the risks, Stalin and his accomplices managed to evade capture, with only one person facing trial later. Stalin's involvement in illegal activities made him a well-known figure to the authorities. Throughout his pre-Soviet life, he faced exile and went into hiding multiple times, often escaping capture for a period before being apprehended and exiled again for his anti-state activities. The rise of the Bolsheviks and Stalin's criminal activities. In 1905, protests flare up across Russia, sparking interest in socialism and communism. Stalin aligned himself with the Bolsheviks, a radical faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, who followed the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, settler of modern communism. Led by Vladimir Ulyanov, known as Lenin, the Bolsheviks provided innovation and direction for the movement. Stalin deeply admired Lenin and his teachings, becoming heavily involved in the movement, especially in his native Georgia and neighboring Caucasus regions. Under Tsarist rule, any non-approved political party was illegal, posing challenges for Bolsheviks and other communists, including funding. Despite these obstacles, Stalin's commitment to Lenin's vision drove his active participation in the movement, as he worked alongside fellow Bolsheviks to advance their socialist agenda amidst the political turmoil of the time. Cultural genocide. In addition to physical violence, Stalin's regime waged a multifaceted campaign of cultural genocide, ruthlessly targeting the identities and traditions of ethnic groups deemed a threat to Soviet dominance. Utilizing a combination of censorship, propaganda, and strict control over media outlets, the regime sought to suppress dissenting voices and impose a singular, homogenized Soviet identity. Intellectuals, artists, and writers faced severe repercussions if their work strayed from the prescribed party line, leading to widespread self-censorship and a climate of fear. Entire cultural movements were suppressed, with languages, religions, and customs forcefully assimilated or eradicated. Ethnic minorities endured persecution, with their schools, churches, and community institutions dismantled or co-opted by the state. International responses. Even as evidence of Stalin's heinous crimes mounted, international reactions to his genocidal policies remained relatively subdued or delayed. A combination of political calculations, diplomatic pragmatism, and the urgent demands of World War II tempered foreign condemnation of the Soviet regime. Many Western powers, particularly those allied with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany, were hesitant to jeopardize the fragile wartime alliance by openly denouncing Stalin's actions. Additionally, the complex geopolitical landscape of the post-war era, marked by the emergence of the Cold War, further complicated efforts to address Soviet atrocities. It wasn't until the aftermath of the war that the full scope of Stalin's atrocities began to be acknowledged and condemned on the global stage, as revelations of mass killings, forced labor camps, and systematic oppression gradually came to light, sparking widespread outrage and calls for justice. Stalin's legacy and contemporary Russian sentiment. In contemporary Russia, a significant segment of the populace stands behind Vladimir Putin's military maneuvers, including his incursions into various regions akin to his earlier actions in Chechnya, Georgia, and Crimea. This backing is rooted in the notion that Russia attained its pinnacle of power and global sway during Stalin's reign over the Soviet Union from the late 1920s to 1953. Many perceive Stalin's era as a time of unmatched Russian dominance, fostering a desire to recapture that status. Consequently, Putin's aggressive foreign policies are seen as efforts to revive Russia's former glory, appealing to those yearning for stability and national strength after the tumultuous post-Soviet period. Putin's image as a defender of Russian sovereignty further bolsters this support, resonating with those seeking resolute leadership and national pride. However, Stalin's legacy remains complex, evoking both admiration for his perceived strength and condemnation for the immense suffering he caused. The resurgence of his image reflects a yearning for authoritative leadership and a return to what's perceived as a more prosperous era in Soviet history, intertwined with contemporary geopolitical dynamics such as the situation in Ukraine and Russia's global standing.